Right, so last time we got handlebars, forks and the shocks fitted to our newly painted frame, which is great news. Today we need to get this thing up and rolling. So I've got a selection of different wheels in front of me and we need to start seeing what shape this bike is going to take. Once we've got some wheels in there, we can start moving it around a bit easier. It's going to be easier to store, but also we can start bolting on some more parts and get a feel for how this thing is going to look. So I'd like to use as much of the stuff that came with the bike as I can. I'm building this on a bit of a budget, but regardless of that, I would like a nice functioning bike, especially since I'm going to have L on the back. Now, most of the parts are going to be getting reused. One of the parts that isn't is my front wheel. So this is the front wheel that came on the bike when I got it. It is nothing fancy and it doesn't have the best brake on it in the world. Not only that, but the spokes are getting really very crusty now, as is the rim. Now, I would possibly be happy to ride with this thing because structurally it seems sound, but I'd kind of like to do something different and I'd like a better front brake. So I was delighted when I went to see John, and with the forks I bought came this. So you can see we've got a bit of an upgrade to our brake now. These are really, really nice brakes, and I believe this wheel actually came off of a 500, but that doesn't really matter, and I'm about to tell you why. So the 500s, generally speaking, they had an 18-inch front wheel, and there are exceptions to that, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that the Thunderbird, a 650, actually came with an 18-inch front wheel. So we're not actually doing anything different than what the factory would have done, except for upgrading our front brake, which is a great thing. These are really, really nice looking units, yeah, it's a bit more interesting than the brake we've got on the old wheel. Not only that, but the chrome on the rim is immaculate, the spokes are immaculate, everything is complete. I'm really, really pleased with this. Even the brake shoes are in tip-top condition. In fact, they nearly look new. So you can see right here, I've got a fresh tyre on it. This is a Hyder now. I've talked about these tyres before. If you want to hear a little bit more about that, I'm sure you could check out some of my 500 Triumph videos. So whilst we've got a little bit of dust going on the rim, there's absolutely no rust. The chrome is a mirror finish underneath there. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a wipe down, and then we can get it into our forks. So we've now got a front wheel on, and I have to say that front end is looking absolutely marvellous. That is bang on the kind of styling I would want, so I'm feeling very good about that indeed. Now, I have had to change the wheel spindle in the front because the wheel spindle that came with that front end wasn't the correct width. There are different widths of those, so one thing you want to be sure of is that you're not going to pinch the fork legs together or similarly expand them, because they won't go up and down properly. But that is going to go up and down properly, and it's going to look good whilst it does it. So now we need to take a look at what we're doing for the back wheel. So back wheel wise, we're actually going to be using the wheel that came with the bike. It wasn't in as bad condition. There is some pitting to the chrome and some of it is kind of rusty, but it is in substantially better condition than that front wheel was. I'm sure it was probably poking out of the tarp or something like that. I've talked about these wheels before, so this is a QD wheel, something I quite like. They get a lot of criticism because they can wear and then that renders your hub kind of useless. In fact, BSA did one where you could replace the splines, which that is a handy thing. But I actually like these wheels. I think they're pretty cool, so I'm pleased to have that. Now, I've been inside there greased up the bearings, and also the tyre has been changed over to another Hyder now. There are a couple of things that need replacing in terms of the rear wheel assembly. In fact, when I got this, it was missing a few spokes. It had a few spokes that were loose, and Rick very kindly replaced them with new old stock Triumph ones. So we've now got a back wheel that's ready to run. However, the sprocket arrangement and the brake arrangement is a different story. So you can see this here is the sprocket and the brake drum that joins to that back wheel. Now this sprocket has got very little teeth on it. That is certainly not a usable item. I question how it even got that far, but seeing some of the things that the builder of this bike has done, I'm not too surprised. So that needs replacing. I've got one on the way but it hasn't arrived yet, so we'll pop that back in the bike and just get it rolling for now. Being a QD wheel, it's not a big job to replace that at all. The other thing is the brake shoes. They have actually broken. Whilst there's not a lot of wear in them, a portion of it has snapped off and gone missing. So they will also need replacing along with that brake drum. But for now, let's just get it in the bike and get it rolling. Well, we now have a roller, and a very smart looking roller at that. I was initially concerned that the front wheel would look too small, as I had a little mock-up before and it looked a bit odd, but now I've changed that front tyre, it is looking really, really smart. This is very, very exciting. So I think in a moment I'm going to roll it out into the garden and just have a look at the stance so I can stand back and take it all in, plan what I want to do next. Yeah. Let's get it off of the ramp, into the garden and take a look. Well, I'm very much pleased with how that's sitting. That is absolutely the stance I'm after. I think we're going to be going this sort of semi-off-road route. Nothing too serious. I'm not going to build another desert racer, unfortunately. I would like to, but I need something a little bit more sensible. And then the 500 can be dedicated to a full-time desert racer. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased with that. I can see the potential and I hope that you guys can too. Now we're at the stage where we can start bolting on bits and bobs and creating our motorcycle. So the last thing we need right now is a speedometer, but I'm actually going to go ahead and bolt on the speedometer because I keep tripping over it and it needs a permanent place, and its permanent place is going to be on those forks. So when it comes to speedos, there are loads and loads of options, and usually what you'll see with Triumphs is one of the round Smith speedos. You might well see a rev counter on there as well. I didn't want to go that route because they just stick out a little bit too far, and also if you decide to just have the speedo and not the rev counter as well, you can't place it centrally very easily because of where the cable exits. So a route that is less taken is to fit a BSA D profile speedo, and that is one of those, which also came from John. Now the handy thing about these is that the speedo cable actually goes in the side, and that will allow us to mount it central to our fork yokes, which I think is going to give it a much more trim sort of look to it. So I'm pretty keen to get that on there and get it out of the way. As I say, I keep tripping over it. So let's bolt that onto the yokes, and we can have a little look and see how it looks. Speedo's on there now, and it does look like it sticks out a little way at the moment, but once we've got a headlight on there, that won't be such a problem. The nice thing about this is that you can have that centrally mounted, sleeker looking Speedo, but while still maintaining that period look. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad about that. One thing I've just been given to me is a new oil tank, but it's not just any oil tank. I've been a little bit specific on what I wanted. So the oil tank that comes on the Thunderbird of this year is this one. It has had a repair. It's kind of perfectly usable, but I decided I would like a chrome one. Now, the Thunderbird ones are different in that they're slightly slimmer. Because this would have originally had a bikini fairing, the oil tank has to sit a little bit further back, and they can be quite difficult to find. I'm not putting a bikini fairing on this, it doesn't necessarily matter, but I do like the way that the slimmer oil tank looks. That's a pretty cool thing. So, when my friends at Brit Steel said, oh, we've managed to get hold of a chrome slim tank, I was all over it. And they very kindly gave me this. Now you can see it's a little bit crusty, but I think it's going to clean up pretty mint. One of the kind of themes I'm feeling about this bike is I'd like to go with sort of a black and chrome and alley look. Something a little bit sort of mean, but fancy. So yeah, I'm absolutely chuffed about this oil tank. It's not exactly the same, but it is a slimmer one, and it is chrome. So we can fit that, but first off, we're going to need to give it a little clean. So out comes the wire wool and a little bit of duck oil, and we'll see how shiny we can get this thing looking. Well, I can't quite believe how well that oil tank has come up. Given how crusty it was beforehand, that is looking absolutely marvellous. And it just goes to show you how good sort of British chroming of the 60s was. Far superior to the Japanese chroming that came out later on. Obviously this is not a factory part, this wouldn't have been chromed by the factory, but our chroming was good back then as well. So yeah, that's polished up really, really nicely, and that is going to look great on the bike. Now, before we fit this, we will have to rinse it out and get rid of any debris in there and make sure it's good to put oil in, basically. But we will do that when we sort out the oilways for the engine. That makes sense. Then it's a job you're not going to forget, and nothing's going to get in there whilst you're building it. So there are tons and tons of different ways that these are mounted, and this is different to the one that came on the bike. So I'm not entirely sure how I want to go about mounting it yet. I think we'll leave that for another day. But this thing, it's going to look fabulous in there. I'm really, really pleased with that. That's very cool indeed. So we've got an oil tank ready to go, which is great. I think what we should look at next is getting a tank and a seat on there, because they're fairly vital items and they're going to be responsible for a large amount of the way that this bike looks. But that's going to have to wait until next week, because they are some trickier jobs, and you will find out in good time why. So, thank you very much guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and you can see the potential that I'm starting to see now from this rolling chassis. Big thank you to you all, and if you did enjoy the video, please give it a little thumbs up, and if you want to see more, if you want to see the completion of this, make sure you subscribe, because there will be riding videos afterwards as well.